Jim Enix, Burlington Yeoman, representative.
Doug Walker represents schools.
Representative County Commissioner.
Sandy Flora, Delphi City Council.
Miriam Burton, City of Delphi.
Donald Truckley, the county sprayer.
Cameron Yates, Area Plan Director.
Cindy Harmon, Legal Counsel.
We have approval of the minutes or any corrections.
Yes, I was not here at that meeting, it has me listed.
Any other corrections?
The days at the top, or in the body are May. instead of June.
You guys should have got an email.
Yeah, she sent it.
Yeah, it was, the second one was sent out corrected, which I think those still reflect the 24th, but then it would just have the correct date on it.
Any other corrections? So none will show. For the minutes, with corrections.
I'll make that motion.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay, looks like, we're ready for the C 2022-4 Feldhouse.
No,
That is one all one.
yeah, flip it over, yep, there you go. That's the next page. You can run the next page too.
One at a time. Okay. We're looking at rezone J&T Farms R 2022-5, petitioning ag to I2.
Good evening, I'm Jim Hurd, representing J&T Farms LP, in our petition to rezone as I2 from agriculture. We have I2 neighboring our property. We have had interest from multiple companies. Our site was highlighted by Duke Energy as one of the sites they supported. And we have sought opportunity to look for things that can grow and improve our community in Camden and Carroll County as a whole.
Yeah, so we, in regards to the property, we have been working with property owners at Carroll County Economic Development Corporation for over a year now. As we began getting interest in industrial area near Camden, the principle to that was the dual serve rail access that property provides. So Genesee and Wyoming is the rail user, for that site, and it's owned by, Orton Grain. And so that's what really drove us to look at how valuable this is to our community and what we need to do. So we, as the Economic Development Corporation, in partnership with a landowner, approached Duke Energy to ask them how they felt about this industrial site. Like, does it meet need in the economic development space? And what is the value proposition, or do we just take this as an anomaly? What we found out quickly through Banning Engineering, who did the site assessment, and there's a fully comprehensive report that we can provide for you. I just didn't want to get down into the weeds of the site itself when it comes to its feasibility. But Duke Energy rated it really one of its grade A rail served industrial sites in the state of Indiana. We did have a lucrative project on the site pending called Project Ecosphere, which can't really disclose where that project went in Indiana, but it was a nice just surprise to us on the value of this transitional land, really, at this point. So Duke did a full evaluation and workup of it. When it comes to when you look at industrial sites, you're looking at a lot of things. First one being, is it zoned correctly for use to utilities, and we can go way into that if you have questions. But the bottom line is that we do see a useful need of this, having an I2 dual rail serve site in Carroll County for use, and we're excited that the landowner and the land resource is willing to work with us and the community on making this a valuable attraction to us. So doesn't mean we have a project imminent, doesn't mean that we will, but our organization is really just trying to assess and research transitional use lands and their value and how can they be applied to our community.
Jim?
We have questions from the board?
What about the access where the road goes, I see there wasn't, thing coming there, that kind of concerns me, having that out in the middle of ag area, what's it do in the area? Depends what you use the property for, I understand that, but if you end up having 100 trucks a day through there, what's it gonna do?
We should be on our team. That's exactly one of the pinch points that we had discussed with Banning Engineering is how in the world are we gonna get access, right? So, we've really looked at how we're gonna do that, and I don't think, we didn't wanna put anything in stone or put any resources financially towards that until we kind of vetted, getting it rezoned to I-2, so we know that it's an applicable use for the property. And then I think we'll sink our teeth in and post, an I-2, if we get an I-2 designation, that we would look at how that access works. So, and yeah, that tricky 218 Meridian Road access point is, limited view, right, obstructed view. So we've gotta figure out a way that's lucrative, even if it's just conceptually, for a project. So, I mean, yes, that was the first question that was brought up.
And really, don't know what it's gonna be, wouldn't know what to use it for. And if they start out using something, they expand, it could be, not be a problem starting with, it could be a huge problem 5 years down the road, which we're all gonna be happy because of that industry there, but yet, the poor property owners out there on the farm close to it, is it fair to them?
Yeah, we gotta be respectable to drainage, we gotta be respectable to all the delineations that we vetted with this property, so I think, our goal would be, if I-2 designation is given, that we would begin to work with the adjacent property owners, with J&T and Farms, and just figure out how we can safely provide ingress, egress, and maybe just even add value to the I-2 designation neighbors, like Hoosierback and Blackburn Trucking. So we wanna further complement them, we don't wanna get in the way of that area, and this designation just, I think, provides a little bit of support in that.
I'm pretty realistic about that issue too. So if we get an I-2 and we start to get opportunities coming into play, I understand what road won't work, in my opinion, right now, the way it currently is built. And, pretty aware that we would have to find creative ways to get that done where it doesn't impact the pins or the other folks that farm around it. And, I grew up farming that, I know that road very, very well. So it's more of a 218 discussion and opportunity there down the road if we can get the I-2, in my opinion, but I'm not the guy smart enough to put all this together, I'm just a farmer.
So right now, it's just, you're wanting, you don't have anybody coming in there, I mean, this is just to get it ready.
There is a project in the pipeline, but there's a lot of feasibility that has to happen, and that's on the power side, the water side, the gas side, so I mean, it's really just a feasibility state, and so we always talk to the other person, no, there isn't a project imminent or anything that this designation, this just helps us, gain exposure to those industries by changing the designation.
Probably talking minimum, no matter what, 5 to 7 years to be able to, the time if you had somebody sign a paper today to get the streets, the road, the power, the sewer, the drainage, to get everything in 5 to 7 years before they open the doors over there.
Yeah, we're definitely planting trees that we're not seeking shade under, so essentially, we wanna be smart about commercial and industrial growth in Carroll County, that's what we do, that's what we love doing, we wanna help you guys play in that. This is just an area where we have adjacent I-2 properties, we wanna signal to the industries that are growing, that we have a site that everybody's agreed that this is a location to locate, so, and that's, I mean, frankly, we have another I-2 designation on the docket today, I was just here last month with Hoosier Heartland. We haven't had to be frank, we haven't had a collective job commitment in over a decade in Carroll County. It's what keeps me up at night, but I will tell you, doing stuff like this, proper planning, I-2 infrastructure, doesn't get you a project, but it certainly gives us the ability to leverage those benefits a little bit harder, so.
Karen, am I allowed?
question. Yeah.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Sure. So, being representing the schools and being an ag teacher, so I can kind of look after ag too. Explain to me how we are going to control loss of ag land when we look over to New County and they have failed miserably with the most productive land in the world, and it's just under concrete. So how are we gonna keep from doing that? And when we do get industry in here, we give them huge tax payments, which is killing schools. We do that. How we open up both of those?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think it's the balancing act between, the revenue that's gonna be generated from the project to the commitment that on the incentive side. So, we can't even get to those, if we don't have properties that we can leverage. I think that's why we've tried to work with responsible transitional land and not try to, take productive ag land out of production. I think our foundation is built on that, and I'm fully aware of that. But when we go talk to communities, landowners about, transitional land, we wanna make sure that we're doing it in a way that's not disruptive to our long-term, I guess, just our long-term growth. And, yeah, I will tell you that, building homes costs you more on the dollar for taxes than building jobs. So the impact on jobs is about 80 cents on the dollar, and the impact for houses is about $1.10, right? People and groups demand more tax dollars. And so, I think when we're looking at industrial sites, as long as we have agreements that these are the locations that are transitional use, and I'm not just throwing darts at the board for productive land, I think is a good way to mitigate that, to answer your question. I think this property, there's a few other in the county that I think our organization would like to look at as using for transitional land, but our goal isn't to just say everything's up for sale and kind of be that loose about it.
Really, it's the rail that we would
That's
be
totally-
messing with this if it wasn't for rail and the fact it's an active rail. So that drove my brother and I and our partners' decisions around taking a shot at it, when the opportunities were tossed around. So we don't have any other farms on rail. I'm certainly not in the business of getting out of the farming. But I think if you look at rail and things like that, and transportation costs, that you can only put so many trucks on the road anyway, so we don't think it's necessarily detrimental to the ag industry to develop something along our rails. But
This is a class
as far as
one rail.
acreage, I mean, I live in Hamilton County, and the fastest growing crop we have are houses, but the schools are doing pretty good, I think, because they keep building turf stadiums and such. So I don't know how it all works, right, because I grew up here and I farm up here, but I think that when I look at what's facing our rural communities, and I look at where I grew up, Deer Creek, and I look at Camden, when the schools consolidated, you started changing, right? So consolidated schools are important, but where are the jobs and what are the future for the people that are living in these towns? Maybe they can get a good job, opportunity closer to home, and we can build some of the wealth in our communities beyond just the farm.
Has this been presented to the Camden and the board games?
Yes, they have been along this project. They're actually doing planning now for infrastructure extensions to this site. So yes, they have pursued this.
How far along are they with that?
I believe they submitted a grant, earlier this year. I haven't had a chance to really dig in whether they got approved for it or not. So we're gonna work with them to do the infrastructure planning piece of it. Whether they put pipes in the ground, I think is not the most important piece. So yes, to answer your question, Cameron, they have been with us since the inception of this Duke grant. So yes, sir.
Would there need to be upgrades to the rail? Obviously, if you've been around that, it doesn't look like it would support a lot of traffic.
Yes, it is a class one rail, so it can support, anything really that you can put on it. The speed is really what the bearing point is, so they can only go up to 30, I don't quote it, but there's a certain speed they have to maintain on the tracks. But the appealing part with it is that since it is a class one rail that's dual served, a product could be made in Camden, Indiana, and be put anywhere in North America. So So that's what Duke loved about it, that's what the industry loved about it, is that, we can make a product in our community, possibly on that site, and put it and deliver it anywhere, in North America. So that's, I think if we do seek investment and we do find one, that Genesee, Wyoming, which is the largest short rail operator in the world, they'll put some money behind making sure that those rail crossings are safe, one, I mean, that'll be primary, and two, making sure that the product can get in and out safely. So that's a really good question. We asked that of the rail, of Genesee, Wyoming, that they present some of those safety features to our communities so that we're not, disrupting that.
If you're shipping something out that is being operating in the factory out there, it's cheaper to ship it by rail or ship it by truck.
My experience in transportation is rail every time.
So in other words, we could ship it, look again, with rail and create, help with the creating of one of the problems, maybe we can ship everything, like it should be similar rail.
That's what I was alluding to, because the trucking right now is a problem in and of itself, so if we could get more rail activity, that's what I was alluding to about reducing truck traffic.
Makes sense.
But the rail business, I had a man tell me 25, 30 years ago, the rail business problem, they're in the rail business, not in customer service business, and he's sitting right back there. And so it is, they seem to be more willing right now based on, and that's kind of what woke us up. The rail woke us up as far as those landowners go, and this gentleman, and their aspirations.
Any other comments or questions?
I got one. I don't want you guys to think that I'm against any of the process or what you're trying to do. So here's the concern, and I've talked to several people from Camden, is I-2 is very broad. It covers I-1 and parts of ag. So how certain can you be that your guys' project's gonna be any of the things that's allowed in here and not the one that people are concerned about, such as they are at Lotus Border? That property went through kind of a similar process, got tossed around, and it was I think it was industrial, and then a company landed that now the entire county's against it. That's what we don't want for the town of Camden. We want a clean, productive, whatever you put out there for the town of Camden, for the people, and all that. So if 5 years, nothing happens, and this is zoned I-2, it's still zoned I-2. You guys walked away from it. Now it could be a junkyard, it could be a poisonous gas factory and all that. So at what point do you guys have something locked down where you can say it's not gonna be a situation we have in Logansport, Cass County?
There's no absolutes, I think, to answer that question, Cameron. I think that, my job as an economic developer is to be a voice of the elected officials that contract with us, and it's in good faith that we won't put a bad project in a community. So I think that there is an element of non-guarantee. We have a standard that we go by when it comes to recruiting businesses, and they have to be above the median wage for income, so we're not gonna accept anything less than what's currently being paid in our community now, which eliminates a lot of those jobs. So there are measures that our organization has in place to prevent the low-hanging fruit to be a barren on our community. So, and it goes back to Doug's point, I think just the fact that we've got to be responsible in what land is transitional and what isn't. So we're not arguing about a property that is, you guys have never even been approached about, that's asking for an I-2. Oh, and by the way, there's a project imminent, right? So I don't want that to happen. My goal is to find suitable transitional land to put projects on, and two, they're not projects that are going to be unhealthy or degrade the quality of the community. So frankly, the town of Camden contracts with us to do this service, and if we put a bad product in their community, I think that brings a disservice to us. So
I don't intend to sell.
and
It's questions you get from the
I'm
community.
farming, yeah, we're gonna farm it. I wanted to, so there's a long history there for us as a family. We intend to continue to farm it. We don't intend, but people die, right? You know, someday I'm in the underground. But our intention is to keep it farmed. The only way it sells is to a good and right thing for our community. I mean, we wanna make money, but I'm not gonna, where I have anything to do with something that's gonna be hard on, I mean, that's my address.
Yeah.
I mean, that, we're not messing with that. My family, if you go back to my mom's family, that is camping. So it just is, the heritage is too deep for me to discount that. So when I heard, when they started talking, I'm the backup, Neil's busy tonight. So when they started talking to me about this, we're not putting in some poison factory.
Well,
And
that's,
pay low wages and then just add to the problems of the community.
Sure.
But now, I will admit, something could happen. We could lose the farm, we could fail grotesquely and have to sell the farm in hardship. Things happen. And I'm just telling you, from our point of view as landowners, we don't have any interest in this thing being developed from anything other than what would be relatively ideal for the community.
Yeah, we're not a partner with landowners that have an ambition to just get a transitional use for a transitional use. We wanna partner with landowners that have vision, long heritage, in ag, because I think that is a sense of responsibility to the community and the environment. And we found that to be kind of the successful piece to us working together.
and again, I get questions from citizens that live right across the tracks, and I told them I would ask the question, and it's certainly it's a legit question when they live that close, so not against the project, I don't want you to think that, but it was a legit question with what we have in our neighboring counties, and that's, some of the concerns they have. But they also know that what you guys are trying to do is a good thing to get, more on, so they seen the whole picture, they just wanted me to kind of get your take on that, so.
Thank you, I'm glad you asked, because if I lived there, I'd probably be in this meeting tonight, so.
I have
So, we're good with. You guys are back there?
Thank you very much.
Thank you. So at this point, we ask for any more.
If there's no more board discussion, you can go to public comments.
Yes.
If there's no public comments, you can take a vote.
Are there any public comments and would like to speak?
I've got one question for you. I guess the only,
Your name, I know your name.
yeah, Jack Begley, I live here in Carroll County. One thing I've seen, and I've seen this in other counties, which is what's kind of cues me to ask a question. I know White County, because I worked with a project there a few years back. The ground was zoned I-1, wanted to change it to I-2. And the only way White County would allow a project requiring I-2 is they had one specific area. And at that point, they weren't zoning anything I-2 or I-3, it had to go into that. They were only changing to I-1. I'm wondering how much I-2 ground we already have, and do we need to think about expanding and limiting, being careful about how we expand and that. That's just my thought. And I'm using White County as an example because I dealt with that. And so that's my question for you, concerns, however you wanna look at it.
Are we even, I don't know that answer.
I can research how much
Yeah,
is that I too, but
Do you know that answer?
I don't have the exact number, but I do know that the pieces that are zoned I-2, were previous projects in the past that never got reissued back to its original zoning use. And I would recommend that our organization help the area plan transition those sites, like the ones that are adjacent to the airport. There's one in Florida that are I-2, and get those back into proper use.
so we just went through this with the one on 300 North, where it was supposed Corey back in the 70s, where it did not revert back to ag and they went to sell their home, so it's kind of similar. That's kind of what he's talking about, but
We would be willing to undertake that, because I think it's irresponsible to have sporadic of those anyways. So that's what we're trying to do, is build a comprehensive plan for I-2 use, so that they're expected, understood, and kind of get rid of the ones that were pipe dreams or never happened, which we've seen to have a flurry of those here in the last
do have some that probably should revert back.
Yes, sir.
And the unfortunate part of that is like the ones on 300, the homeowners had no idea that their property was on line 2. Title searches didn't pick it up until they went to sell their house, and the bank said, we're not gonna give you the financing for something that's on line 2. So that's how that whole string of houses are coming up. So I don't know there's a whole lot of areas other than that, because that was a quarry that was proposed in the 60s and 70s.
So, I have a question then now. Thanks, Jack. So if this is voted into I2, is there a stipulation that after 20 years, nothing happens, does it revert back, or how do we do that?
You guys could.
And I would recommend that.
That would be my recommendation.
The board can do that.
Because projects come and go, resources come and go. I know we're looking at doing the the county's looking at doing the 75 extension, which is gonna up that site, the I2 site being more of a value because of its connectivity to the heartland. So that, this is part of the long-term vision for Camden and getting a viable industrial site for the town. But yeah, we'd have no taking no issue in giving a timeline on it, for it to revert back. So I think it's a very good point.
And we've done that in past, that's what we did with the site outside of Florida.
On 75.
On 75, yeah.
What kind
What-
of timeline?
what kind of time?
You can give it a 10-year with the option of extending if there were still talks going on. I think it's close to expiring. Yeah, he is close to expiring.
Any other comments, public comments?
Hi, my name is Lindsay Penn, and I did not grow up in this community. I am originally from Cass County, but live here in Carroll County. And we do live in the property adjacent to what they are trying to make into I2, and I do ask for you to not vote that way. I was driving a semi today and felt very unsafe driving to our land from 218 because of the blind spots and the areas that I'm trying to navigate to our farm. I do know that Mr. Hurst's family hasn't farmed that land for, do you know how many years you have owned that land?
We bought it, no, I don't know, maybe 13 or 2014, I can't quite remember, so good answer. We farmed it when I was a boy.
Okay,
We rented it from the Joyce family, and then Select Seed moved in and rented it away from us
uh-huh,
for a span of time, and then we bought it when the matriarch passed, and the daughter wanted us to own it, so we bought it and put us back on it. So, but first
Sure.
time I ever drove a tractor by myself was on that farm in the 1970s, so.
great.
So we were there a long time, and now we're back.
Uh-huh. I would just be curious on, you know, the legitimacy of them purchasing land that is close to rail, if they are interested in selling it, maybe in the long term. There are lots of young kids that living up to that area, and I am concerned if there is property that's going to change from ag to industrial, if it is going to take 5 to 10 years to get that money back, you know, what loss are we going to see in a community from that, as well as for the schools, like what Doug had said. But I just know that they're not making any more farmland, and every day we have to make the choice to eat, and so I just wanted to say my piece.
Anyone else? Guess I would entertain a motion.
Or commissioners. Is that just Camden or commission? This is commissioner goes outside.
Yeah.
Outside.
So it would be, it would be a
So it'd be a
motion
recommendation
to,
to the.
for recommendation,
Final
either
approval by the commissioner.
approve, deny, or no recommendation. And if you wanna put some parameters in there too, I would go ahead and do that now. Timelines or things, something like that. I mean, ultimately, it's, that part would still be up to the commissioners also, but it would give them guidance.
So we could say like 20 years if we didn't have a commitment, or 20 years if it's not fulfilled. Is that something that we,
I'm trying to remember what we did with the last one. I think, no, it had to be beyond a commitment, because we had commitments on the other project, and it just never would, they could never get it financed. So, I think it would have to be a completed project within a certain time period, if that's what you're looking at.
You said, 10 years.
I think it was, yeah.
I guess, my only concern at this point is we're missing 4 board members. So,
Table if you wish, or you can make a recommendation to the commission. It's your.
if we postpone, that gives time to talk through some situations, to recommend or not.
George in Minnesota.
George in Minnesota. He's not gonna make it.
No.
I don't, if you guys aren't comfortable with it, by all means, I don't think it's a decision that ultimately goes to the commissioner, but if you're not comfortable with it, and you need another month to filter through the questions and stuff like that, and have the board present, then that's certainly your option. This is a big project or a big move going from that guy too, so if you're not comfortable, we want more time, don't think 30 more days is gonna stop the funds. So that's an option for you guys to do.
it'd be kind of nice to see what Jordan's input to do.
I'll make a motion, we table it till next meeting. That way you can get Jordan involved.
It's been moved and seconded that we table or postpone to the next meeting. Any comments? All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say. Okay, well, table that one or postpone that one till, August. What's that date, August? 23rd.
And at that meeting, since we've already had a public hearing, it will just, all it will need to be then would be discussion of the board,
Okay.
and then send a recommendation from them.
Yeah, I really would like the other 4 members. That brings us to rezone, Kirkhoff LLC, the R 2022-6, saying ag to I2. Okay.
Give them a PDF of that, Jake.
Yes. I got it. Little one if you wanted to.
So for this one, we did not receive anything via mail. We get one phone call just asking general questions on it, once they receive the public notice. So other than that,
Ryan Wright with Kirkhoff Wright LLC, we're petitioning to rezone from ag to I2 on a property we've got there near the Andersons, close to the Abbey softball fields. We've had some inquiries on the property potentially, and then we've talked to the rail, which is the conceptual you've got in front of you there, about potential opportunities with the property going forward.
Questions?
This has been, we do have a couple active prospects for this site currently. This is a little bit further along. We're working out feasibility of infrastructure right now with the city of Delphi and figuring out how infrastructure is gonna get to the site. If there is a project, what's it gonna cost? This really took shape when obviously the Heartland went through and kind of created a bisection of 218 of a really nice piece of transitional land, being the fact that it's across the street from the Andersons. And we are working with Andersons with this as well, so they've been at the table this whole time with the discussion as we're working through feasibility. As with any site that we're working on, the EDC there is a ton to do, right? We have to figure out how many megawatts are on the site, how much gas can be served, how much water do they need, how much effluent they need. There's just environmental phase 1, 2, geotechnical, survey, site and civil, archaeological. So we're working through all those things on each site, and one of those could trigger a site to just be non-useful. And then we just, as an organization, move on. We just, okay, that's not a feasible site, let's go find another piece of transitional land and work with the landowner. This has really fell through the rigor as well when it comes to rail serve, access to the highway, not adjacent to residential, it's right next to, like I said, the Andersons, and we're working with them on a transportation plan because they have a lot of trucks that load up, and what does the future intersection look like right there? So we've been able to have those conversations with the county area plan because we're in their MPO, so we're able to talk about like all of that, and so that's what's really brought this forward. So having people invest in our community that are looking at transitional land is also a value to us, obviously, right? And finding good land use partners that are going to be responsible users as well. So this is one of those scenarios where we spend a significant amount of resources in working with landowners on what the future of this property could look like, and this is where we are today with conceptual, the rail, and the property as well.
Can you turn the overlay district on? Is there a layer for that on there?
There is not. Yeah, there is.
It is.
It hasn't been working, so we'll see if that highlights it or not. Lauren is trying to get it.
It is sandwiched between two I-2s, so it really is it almost seems really almost feasible to be I-2.
Where's the other ag?
So it'd be the property to its northwest across the tracks, and then the Andersons would be property to the south. So, so this would be an I-2 right here. Yes. And then, yeah, so we would be seeking that one as well, and then obviously to the south where the Andersons is as well.
That's the overlay, it's usually a different color, but.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So are you wanting this one, I-2, or you
So if I hit zoning line, it blends
I
in.
believe, I don't know what kind of parcel designation.
Put it on there.
Okay.
The ideal scenario after doing a study is it looks like it's gonna end up being detention right here. If there is a project, we gotta get the water somewhere, and so we're working with engineers to figure out where the water would go. So, I hate being absolute, there isn't anything absolute, just, we're, like I said, we are just trying to find transitional use that fits the bill so we can bring jobs to the community, and this is another scenario where, we just wanna make sure that it's applicable to area plan, it fits use, and we have willing, landowners to work with us.
She's been in this business 48 years, and it's really 40 years. The problem is not with the original people, the problem is when the deal falls through, if somebody sees his land fixed up I-2, that has no bearing, so that's, oh, I-2, I can do this. The problem never with the first people, they always have to come with
Good
the
intentions.
good people, the right, good intentions. It's that 25 years down the road, I guess I'll be in the ground with them too, but, and then they're going, we can't do anything about it, that rezoned. That junkyard's there.
I ran into that with the Pearson's land next to the airport. That's actually zoned I-2, that whole strip next to the airport. And I was like, wow, like, as I was beginning to look at property in the county and where we see the next phase of industrial growth beyond that, even beyond the industrial park, and that was, that's something that should be reverted back. And even to our last, petitioner, I think giving us a 5 or 10 year runway on this site would be of value. If we're just gonna move on, if we can't get a deal done in that timeframe, it's probably something we need to be moving on to another location and looking at, so.
But you need at least 5 years once you make anything happen.
Yes, that's correct.
I mean, if you think you can do it 2 to 3 on industrial, I don't think that will happen.
No, specifically with rail, it's just a different challenge, because you've got to build your spur in, and to be honest with you, if having a rail served I-2 asset in our community gives us tremendous amount of ability. So that's a check mark for the state of Indiana, to have, and so that's what we're trying to do here.
I'll be honest, I thought it was already got two. I did too.
That was already I-2. Well, I mean,
Oh, this one?
Anderson
Yeah.
is, yeah, so.
Oh, that's what.
Can you guys see the overlay here? It's supposed to be a different color, our GIS is trying to get that changed and work through it. So if I take county zoning off, this is. What's the technology? Yeah, so here's the overlay. Again, you can, going back to the previous petition, you can put timeframes in. Yeah, I don't know where this one's at with the other entities involved with, but timeframes on it, like we discussed in the last one, or, this one as well is gonna go to the commissioners for a recommendation.
And I will say they're redoing the substation there, at Anderson's. And so, if we do move forward with an I-2, that will be, I believe, perpetuate a continued investment by Carroll and Walnut Valley Power in that substation facility. And if we can get an extra meg or 2 megs expansion for that substation, that just makes, that really signals to them that we are interested in developing this area industrially, and they want to provide the proper, I mean, it could save them hundreds of thousands of dollars in upgrades if we do get a project down the road. So there's a lot of partners at the table on this property, to include the rail and Wabash Valley, Carroll White, and Anderson. And so it's been really refreshing to have a team stick together to work on this area of our community.
Any other questions from the board? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
No written complaints from anybody?
No, I had one phone call from a property owner and just asking general questions that I did not have the answer for, so.
Yeah, this is 22 I-2 already.
Right, yeah, so this up here is industrial, this is industrial.
We'll take public comments.
Yep.
For everybody.
Sharon Milberg, I just have a question, I didn't understand. It's gonna be Delphi City Utilities that are running out there?
We're exploring currently Delphi City Utilities. Yes, ma'am.
If that's the case, I would ask that you not vote for that. The city water is high enough, we're not having enough water now. And if they build something that's gonna incur more water, that's gonna be moved right onto the taxpayers that live in the city. Our water rates are high enough. Other than that, I think it's a smart move, because it's, like they said, sandwiched in between that. But if they're gonna be pulling city water, I think you should not